Hey, welcome to the Camden Otis Show. Guess what? New month. New month means new theme. And new theme also means I get to practice reviewing the previous themes. All right. So I've got
Let's
the
see it.
year down 100%. So the theme for Tribe and Purpose for 2021 is focus. That
Mhm.
I'm focusing today. And matter of fact, I even wrote a little bit of something for those of you who subscribe to the Monday Moments newsletter. You might see a common theme. If you haven't ever figured it out, my mind doesn't go very far. So, focus for 2021. January was beginnings. Get something started. Quit waiting around. February, my tricky month. Clarity.
There you go.
Know what you're going after. Have a clear picture of it. And the clearer it is, the easier it is to find. And then the month we just wrapped up, March, almost forgot that word. March is prepare. So make sure you're putting in the work to achieve what you want to achieve. That's preparation. And
Mhm.
preparation never ends. Keep doing it, always doing it. And this month, man, one of my favorites, because I talk about this all the time with clients and anybody that listens to me. Sorry, folks.
The pains of being a coach. You never stop coaching. It's a hard thing.
It's who I am, right?
Mhm.
It's the obstacles, and there's people look at, I find this really interesting because people look at obstacles as things outside of their control.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I'll flash back to when I was an engineer in the Army, because one of the jobs of the Corps of Engineers, a combat engineer, is to create obstacles to slow down the enemy or
Mhm.
channelize the enemy. Now that's a different kind of obstacle. But what that is that thing that moves or influences someone else to do something. And those kind of obstacles, I mean, tank ditches, triple strand concertina wire. Oh man, there's just hundreds and hundreds of things. Abattis, I always joke about abattis out on the road here. Uh, but those things, they don't stop the bad
Mhm.
guys. They may shift them and they may slow them down, but they don't stop them. So that's what obstacles are.
Yeah, and I think you really hit the nail on the head right there with that. It's there are things that get in the way, things that slow you down, things that mess you up, mess up your plans. But at the end of the day, obstacles are things that you can overcome. And there's the saying we've used before: the obstacle is the way. That and if there's an obstacle in the way, that means that there's a lesson there, and there's a lesson to be learned, and that lesson is what you're going to need to complete your journey. Is the way I always look at it. Whenever and I can't act like I'm a true stoic who does this every single time I have an obstacle cross my path, but I do work that silver linings muscle quite a bit. Of okay, well, what am I going to learn from this? Every time I get caught in traffic, gosh, how many times do I need to get taught patience? Right? Apparently, one more because I got caught in traffic again. Every time something like that happens, every time there's an obstacle that is interrupting my day, you want to try to look at that as a reason to move forward and as a lesson that you can take from that so that you can continue to move forward and overcome those type of obstacles in the future.
Well, it's an opportunity to learn, right? I mean, even if I,
Exactly.
go back to my Corps of Engineers world, my time, my first job in the Army. Well, not really. Don't want to get into the whole story, but my first job as an officer on active duty, lots of caveats here in the Army, when I was an engineer, you know, what we when we played or somebody, the bad guys on a training exercise or whatever would do those same things to us. Well, we would learn how to overcome those obstacles.
Mhm.
A tank ditch, and by the way, a tank ditch is literally a ditch in the ground that's really wide and really deep that tanks go and they fall into. Okay.
Simple
And
enough.
yeah, I mean, it's not really that, it's not rocket science. We weren't, it wasn't that hard of stuff to make. Uh, but it's time consuming to overcome it. But you know what? Once it's overcome, then that builds that next thing. You build that next achievement off of it. I talk about creating success and building on success. That's what, when you overcome that obstacle, just like what you were talking about, Camden, that's a lesson learned that you can have. Switch it to the business world. If you switch it to the business world and you have an obstacle, let's say a lack of cash flow for this month, because one client hasn't paid, another client may have ended their services early or whatever, or ghosted you, and now you have a cash flow problem. Okay, that's an obstacle. How do you handle that? How do you overcome that? Because if you look at it as something that's going to stop you, then it will stop you. But if you look at it as something that you can learn from and overcome, then you get stronger and better, because you know what? Something's going to happen like that again. Cash flow, it's business, right? The more you grow, the more cash flow you have to have, and the more cash you have coming in and out of your system. But the problem still exists. You can still have, whether you're a solopreneur and you're just worried about paying the mortgage, or you got 100 employees, every business owner I've ever worked with and known, to include this one and the one on the other end, it's cash flow. And that obstacle, how do you overcome that every time that it happens? And what do you do to overcome it when it does happen, so it doesn't shut you down, so you don't go bankrupt or whatever because of cash flow? Because that's just an obstacle. And obstacles are for overcoming. They're not to stop you.
You got me thinking. The other word that people often use when we talk about obstacles is hurdles. I faced a new hurdle. I've got to overcome this hurdle. It's a very common thing for people to say. Mm-hmm. So let's step back a little bit on that. If you're running a race, is there one hurdle or is there a lot of hurdles? There's going to be a lot. There's never, no race worth its salt is going to have one hurdle in it. That's not exciting enough. We're going to have 10 hurdles, right? And that's how life is. There's always going to be a new hurdle. Might be tall, might be short. You might be able to overcome it easily. It might be something you've overcome before, but those hurdles, those obstacles are always going to keep popping up, because and that's not meant to be pessimistic or cynical. It's just that there's always going to be a new problem that's going to arise. It's not the end of the world. You can overcome it very easily sometimes, but those problems are going to continue to arise over and over and over again. And so they're just a part of the journey, is the way to think about it. If you're running the 310 meter hurdles, did I get that right? 300 meter, 110 hurdles, 300 meter, right?
Yeah,
whatever.
110 meter hurdles, and then the 400 meter hurdles.
Somebody ran 2 years of track in middle school. But if you're going into that, you're looking at it as the entire journey. Those hurdles are going to keep coming up, and you're going to have to keep going through them over and over and over again. You're not going to curse the fact that there's a hurdle in your lane, because guess what? There's a hurdle in the person next to you's lane as well. This is just how life works. Life's always going to throw problems in front of you, and it's up to you to overcome those obstacles.
Well, as you were talking, that I thought sports, and when two teams come together and they're fighting each other to win the match, whatever it is, whatever sport it may be.
It can just be rugby. It's all right.
Yeah, rugby. Which rugby match would you rather watch? One where it's tight, it's a tight battle. They're constantly putting up obstacles for the other one to achieve success, and they keep going back and forth, and it may be, in rugby terms, it may be a 30-27 final score, where the last score, Scotland over France, where the last score is done in dead time. Man, that's the match I want to watch, as opposed to New Zealand All Blacks versus USA Eagles. When you know the outcome, only thing that you can hope for is that the Eagles are going to score maybe a couple of tries on some dumb luck. Mm-hmm. As opposed to this match, because what it is the obstacles that the All Blacks put in front of the Eagles to hinder their progress are so much more successful, and the Eagles don't have the skills or the power to overcome those obstacles in enough time. Now, maybe if they played for 3 days in a row or 72 hours continuously, we might get a little bit closer.
Mm-hmm.
But it depends on whether or not they can overcome those obstacles in the moment of the action. So to use that as an example, take it a little bit further, when you come to something that hinders you, let's take it to something everybody understands. You're going out for dinner. It's date night, Camden. You're
Yes,
going
sir.
out for dinner. You know the restaurant. You've been there probably 4 or 5 times in the last couple of years, but you hadn't been there in a month. And the first obstacle you encounter is, guess what? The city decided to repair the road and it's closed. How do I get there? All right, well, I got to reroute myself.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's going to take me 5 minutes longer, 10 minutes longer. Then I get to the restaurant and, I've never had to have reservations before. Now I got to have reservations for this restaurant. All right, what do I got to do that? An hour? All right, let's wait. Let's go have drinks at the bar. Or let's go down to Culver's and just get a butter burger instead of going to this fancy dinner, right? These are all obstacles that occur, but they're only hindering you and how much you allow them to hinder you. And we haven't even talked about where true obstacles really take shape and really affect what you're able to do.
You know what I'm thinking there is that it's all about perspective, right? You know, so much of life is about expectations. And if you have this expectation on your date night, to take that example, of this beautiful dinner at this nice fancy restaurant, and then you're not able to do that, on any other night, you would be happy to have yourself a burger from Culver's. But because your expectations were so high, that feels like a loss to you. Simple, simple, simple. Just change your perspective on it. Just change your expectations. And the same type of thing goes for these obstacles, these hurdles that we're talking about, right? You know, sometimes here, easy example. If you're laying down on the floor staring up at a hurdle that's 4 feet tall, that hurdle looks really big. Now, if you're our size and you stand up straight, that hurdle's not big anymore. 4 feet tall, shoot, even with my back, I could probably climb my way over that in 10, 15 minutes, but I can't jump it anymore, but I can still make it over that obstacle. And so I think it really comes down to perspective on these things. Just like when I used the example of traffic and taking it as, a lesson for patience, right? When you're frustrated with things because things don't go as planned, you let yourself get affected by things more than is necessary. These obstacles that we're talking about in all these different examples, they only affect you as much as you let them, right? Being 5 minutes late to work because I got stuck in traffic, I had the obstacle of traffic. Okay, I lost 5 minutes of my workday. But do you let that spiral into something worse and mess up your entire day? Or do you just take it as those 5 minutes? Or the third option, you take it and say, okay, well, now I get 5 more minutes of my podcast. It's still a win. I get to call my family and talk with them and catch up for a little bit longer. It's still a win. You have to be able to flip those perspectives because life's going to throw changes at you all the time. These obstacles aren't going to stop. I don't know how many times I'm going to say that this episode. Obstacles won't stop. You just have to be ready to change your perception and challenge your expectations and when those situations arise.
Well, I got to jump back to date night because I just got to let you know that if there was an hour away at the fancy restaurant, I'd be really happy going to Culver's and getting a butter burger. Miss Suzanne, probably not so much. Just so you know.
Oh yeah, goes back to understanding your team, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I better find another white tablecloth place or bring one into Culver's with me. That's all I gotta say. But you know what? All those sort of things are spot on. It's what you do in your head that determines how bad that obstacle is. Let's go back to the military example. You had that massive tank ditch in the way. And if the plan was to go that direction And that was the only way that you believed that you could be successful. And the bad guys put up this tank ditch. And now, man, your synchronization with all the other elements of the battle are all thrown off because you can't get through that tank ditch for another 2 hours because, oh, by the way, the bulldozer you need is 10 miles back. And it's got to get all the way up here. And, oh, by the way, the bad guys are shooting at you while you're trying to fill in the ditch. All those sort of things. So if you stand there, that's a great example of it, though, if you think about it.
Mhm.
You stand there with your hands on your hip going, damn this thing. Guess what the bad guys are doing? Shooting at you.
Oh, yeah.
Guess what happens in real life? It don't get better.
Mhm.
You can stand at it, cuss at it, kick it, throw it, and ain't going to fix it. You got to overcome it. And that's where the mental picture of it, the perspective of it, the overcoming of it, the understanding of how much do I want this to affect me comes into play.
Mhm.
Really, really, truly in the end, because there's so much opportunity if you look for it. You can focus, and I said this before too, you can focus on the goalie or the open space in the net.
Mhm.
Because the open space in the net is the opportunity, the goalie is the obstacle. And if I'm playing hockey and I'm shooting the puck, interestingly enough, when youth are starting to play a sport, whether it's soccer or hockey, and they have that goalie,
Uh-huh.
their little minds focus on the goalie. That's why the goalie always looks so great at that level, except for
Right.
those 1 or 2 kids who figured out they can see open space.
Mhm.
So look for that open space in the obstacle. Is it pivot left, right? Is it back up, hold what you got, reset the plan, and then go forward again? The options are infinite. Those are just a couple that I'm throwing out as funny examples,
Right.
but it's so true. You can't just sit there and stare at it and expect it to go away.
It's, you're taking me back to the cash flow story that we were talking at the beginning. Okay, bills are coming. Are you just going to stand there and look at how messed up your situation is and be upset about it and get mad at people or anything like that? Or are you going to focus on what's inside of your control, going back to February for a little bit of clarity, and focusing on what's inside your control and what you can do to change your situation? Hash those expectations, leave them at the door. It's when you're in that kind of situation, the expectations will only hurt you. You have to adjust to what's happening in front of you at all times.
So the obstacle thing is one of the things that I ask everybody in my tribe about. What's an obstacle or a block that you've encountered? And when we first started doing this, when somebody just joining the tribe, one of the things they'll say is, well, I couldn't get this investment, I couldn't get that, or I had an employee that quit and now I can't do this, or it's like, those aren't the obstacles. The obstacle is the thing in your head saying that that's a problem.
Right.
And when those things happen, they feel like problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it goes back to looking, and actually I'm gonna take it to the rugby example because that's where my head's at right now. The obstacle in front of you when you're playing offense in rugby, and this goes to any sport, is the defense, right? If we run the ball and we're getting tackled and we're not making the game line and we're not going anywhere, does that mean that you stop trying? Does that mean that we're beat? No, we still have ball. We still have possession. We still can attack. And that's how you have to flip your perspective on these things. It's actually something that I coach a lot here at the U of A with the younger boys. A lot of freshmen have this kind of problem because they were all stars. So they used to run over everyone back in Indiana or wherever the heck they're from. And then they get out there and they have this expectation of running through tackles and just sidestepping everybody. And then one of these big seniors just sticks them in the ribs and puts them in the dirt. And for a lot of guys, they look at that as this impassable obstacle. But then the smart ones, the coachable ones, realize that, okay, this is just a hurdle. This is just an obstacle that I have to overcome. And the best way that you can do that is by changing your expectations. I'm no longer going to run and try to score every single time. Now I'm going for 6 inches. I'm not going for the whole meters, 50, 60 meters, however far away we are from scoring. All I'm going for is 6 inches every single time. And when you change your expectations and you focus on those little wins like that, like just getting 6 inches every time, that's all the momentum you need. And the same type of thing goes for business. We're talking about the cash flow problem. If you have that problem, there's a few different ways you can go about it. The best way is to look for a quick win. What can I do? Can I get another customer? Can I, are there grants or loans out that can cover me for this time if you're got an applicable business? What types of ways are there that you can move forward quickly without just sitting there and dwelling on the negativity that is the obstacle? Because when you dwell on the negativity that is the obstacle, you give the obstacle way more power than it ever had in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. And I love the 6 inches gain line because, if you think about it, just to translate rugby terms, only thing the gain line is where the ball is.
Right.
So if you get 6 inches in front of the gain line, you've made progress. But what's great about rugby when you watch a match is the persistence and patience that can be developed, because that 6 inches is 6 inches and 6 inches. And let's say you get 24 inches and then maybe you drop another 12, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you do something a little different and you switch it up, and maybe you go outside and you don't get anything, but then you go inside, and then all of a sudden, boom, it opens up and you get 8-10 yards.
Yep.
And this is where the successful rugby teams really make the difference, and business, because this translates to business. When something goes right in your business and you have success in your business, pile on it, build on it. The military, we talk about that all the time. Back in the old days of, the lines of defense and lines of attack and all these sort of things that we talk about, and we'd have a breakthrough. You think about Blitzkrieg, World War II in Germany, when they would break through the line, the French line, they didn't attack the whole thing. And this kind of goes back to your analogy of the player running dead on into the brick wall. They didn't attack the whole thing. They pinpointed it and they focused on that spot. And then when it broke, boom, massive flow, build on success. That's what you got to do in your business. When those things happen, when opportunity opens up, man, you got to jump all over that and take it on and build on it. Quit worrying about this good idea that you had over here that was just kind of, wow, I really think this is going to work. And this thing over here that you weren't quite sure about, all of a sudden start working. You better jump on that thing and build on that fire right then. Don't wait for it.
Yeah, exactly. I think, when you build on success, you get so much more success. The way I talk about it in rugby is, we've talked about it too with and I'm blanking on it. I was going to say elliptium curves. I don't think that's the right word at all, but the performance curves we've talked about before. We had Angus on the show. And what happens is you reach this pinnacle of performance where you are very successful, and that will naturally, no matter what, that is going to drop down. That is the obstacle that is built into success, is that success runs out unless it changes. And so the trick is then, how do you jump to that next curve? How do you jump over that valley that you're dealing with there and then start performing again at a higher level? And that's where it really comes down to. You have to build on your success, and then you have to amplify from that. The reason I'm saying this is because I think it needs a little bit more exact explaining. Because, if we take the rugby analogy, if we break through the line, you have success where you are now, but the best success will come from shifting the point of attack one more time. In business, if we're getting sales, I'll use Verby as an example because it's easy. If I'm getting sales in a bunch of private business events for internal trainings, that's great. I want to keep getting more internal trainings, but the real money then is going to be, what's the slight pivot to the outside of the field, shifting it so the defense isn't ready. Where is that next slight pivot? If going from private business events and for internal trainings to internal parties for business, and saying, hey, y'all had so much fun at that training. How about we do this and have a nice party on Friday night? We could send whiskey and do a whiskey tasting to your entire employee staff. That sounds great. But to get the true success there, not only do you pile on to what you already have going, but you look for that next success that's parallel to it.
Yeah, well, it just reminded me of the whole aspect of the building on it, and the building on that success, and the way that you determine where to go. And I'll mess up the Sun Tzu quote, but it's the attack where the enemy is weak, or I think one of the ones that I saw is where you are perceived weak, be strong, and where you are strong, perceive weakness.
Yeah.
In my Texas translation of Chinese Confucianism, and it's actually Japanese. Sun Tzu is Japanese, so no letters, please. But it's that whole point of identifying that, and that's sports, right? Offense, attacking, and things like that. In business, you got to translate that a little bit, because you're not looking for weakness. I mean, unless you're in some sort of direct competition with a competitor and you're trying to directly take down that competitor, which is, I recommend against that as a business model, by the way. But if you're doing that, how do you translate that to the business world? And what you're doing is you're translating that to what's the problem sets? What's the thing that your clients want that you provide? What do you solve? That's the weakness. That's the translation into the business world. So what we're doing when we do that is we're actually avoiding those obstacles. A friend of mine told me a while back, you can't say the right thing to the wrong person, and you can't say the wrong thing to the right person. I know he wasn't the author of it. Somebody else said it, but the point of that is that's Sun Tzu's weakness. When we talk about weakness and identifying weakness, if we're attacking in rugby or basketball or football, whatever, where's the weakness in the defense? And that's what I want to attack. You see it in the NFL all the time. Some cornerback gets hurt and they bring in the sub. What do? They throw right at that guy. Next play. That's the weakness. So when you translate that to business, it's what is that problem? What's that niche that you provide that somebody says, makes me feel better? It's a flip of mindset, and it's really kind of an interesting mindset. But what you're doing is you're overcoming that obstacle of, I've got a really good idea that I think is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And you know what? Nobody else gives a damn.
I think there's a little bit more to unpack there before we wrap up on this, because you were talking about competing directly. The idea that it's okay, I'm selling the same widget as the guy across the street, and we need to go, and they are our obstacle. That competition is our obstacle. That's not really what it is. You got to flip that perspective, like we've been saying. That's not your obstacle. That's a competition. That's someone else who has that product. But your obstacles are all going to be internal. They're all going to be getting your product to the customers. It's not that they're literally out there stealing it, right? And then what I was really thinking on that, whether it's, rugby, football, UFC, whatever it is do you want to compete directly? Because that's generally a terrible idea. And this is going to be a very specific reference that a handful of people that listen will get this. Takes me back to high school rugby. We were playing Aurora. How do we beat Aurora? We spin the ball wide. What happens on game day? 40-mile-an-hour wind. So we got to play tight ball for 70 minutes against a bunch of big Polynesian boys. And it sucked. We barely freaking won that game because, thanks to the environment, we wound up going and playing their fight. You have the choice with your strategy to attack the strength or attack the weakness. And attacking the strength is just a terrible idea. I'm not sure if you watched the fights this past weekend, Francis Ngannou becoming the new heavyweight champion in the UFC. What are you going to do if you're fighting Francis Ngannou next week? Are you going to go try to punch him in the face? Hell no. That's where his game is. You stay away from that. No one's going to go out and say, okay, you know what? Maybe I could punch him harder than he can punch me. You can't. There's no point. And when you try to pit your strength against strength, you wind up in good thing I finished on the UFC analogy, you wind up in a fist fight where you're just punching each other in the face, going like that. The veteran Mark Hunt would always say, you go play punch face. That's not a sustainable career. And there's a reason Mark Hunt was never the UFC champion. It's because he would just go out and play punch face. He wasn't smart about what he was doing. And so you really have to look at it like that. Do you want to pit a strength against a strength? When there's a brick wall in your path, are you going to go punch it till it falls over? Because it'll fall over eventually. You can get it. But are you going to climb over it? Are you going to go around it? You're going to build yourself a ladder. There's all these other solutions that are there. You don't have to beat yourself up by trying to punch a brick wall over and over again till it falls over. You'd probably have just as much luck punching a brick wall as you would Francis Ngannou, for that matter.
Yeah. Well, and having punched a brick wall once or twice in my life, don't recommend it. So I'll just put that out there as a life lesson for those of you, both figuratively and literally. So just know that there are other ways to get through the brick wall. Sometimes there's a door to your left or right if you take your eyes and look at the bigger picture. So with that, Camden, what'd you learn today?
So first and foremost, I learned that tank ditches are just as simple as they sound. And that was very interesting. But I wanted to go back because you said a word when you were talking about those obstacles in your engineer times that I did not know. And you kind of threw it off because I'm guessing it's something that is very common to use, an A word.
Abattis.
Abattis. Can we get a quick definition, please?
Sure. An abattis is nothing more than a series of trees, usually 50 meters deep, that you fall into the road where the point of the trees where they crisscross on each other, are towards the bad guy.
Okay.
Another simple obstacle. You know, if you think about, well, Camden, I mean, this only worked for you. And those of y'all that have been to the house, think about the driveway, cut down some trees, cross the driveway, that creates an obstacle in the driveway. That is called an abattis when you do that.
Okay. Sounds great. Well, there's another great thing I learned, but then the real takeaway, besides just the fun knowledge that I always like to pull out of you from your Army days and your engineer days, was the patience to overcome the obstacles. Every situation that we talked through, whether it was business, rugby, fighting, football, any of these different situations that we were looking at, what it really comes down to is patience. You have to have the patience to see the opportunities that are in front of you instead of just staring at the obstacle that's in front of you.
Yeah.
How about you? What'd you learn?
Yeah. Mine was, where'd it go? Competition in business is not an obstacle. As much as you want to think about it, you know, it's like, I'm going to take down Amazon. You know, you don't got to take down Amazon. All you got to do, and I've been at pitch nights where companies have pitch this as part, or made this as part of their pitch, is all we got to do is take away 1% of Amazon's annual revenue. If you think about that, that's a lot for a small business, and truthfully, to Amazon, probably not a whole heck of a lot. But you know, when you think about that, it's the mindset of abundance. And you know, do you believe there is only one apple pie? I mean, there's even people who don't even believe there's one apple pie. They believe there's only one slice of the pie. But do you believe there's one apple pie? Or are you like me and believe that there's not only more apple pies, there's not only more apples, but you know what? I can plant some seeds and grow apple trees and have all the apples I want to make all the pies I want. It's an attitude that you can have. And then when you have that attitude, you don't have to worry about the competition. You learn from the competition, you get ideas from them, and you can compare yourself to them. You can use it as a measuring stick. excuse me, but you can't, if you focus on the competition, you'll never have success.
Yep.
Because all you're trying to do is model them. And guess what? They're already doing it successfully.
Oh yeah. And it's, just like we were saying in the, the Francis Ngannou example. Why would you go play punch face with a guy like that? Why would you go try to compete with a company like Amazon or whoever where they are already competing? It just doesn't make any sense, And before we end it, I got a quick story going back to one of my first business ventures with Cobra Valley. And the business model we were working on there was for locally based sustainable agriculture, just to put it real broad of what we were trying to do. And a lot of that was consumer based. We were sending everything based on what the consumer was demanding in that exact environment. And I remember I got pushback really early on of this business model before we had any seeds in the ground. These people were saying, oh, well, isn't that going to piss off Fry's? Like, what is Walmart going to do? Gosh, dude, if Walmart notices my farm, I think I'm in a good enough place. Like, that is not the obstacle you have to be worrying about right now. Focus on your work. And if that comes, that's what comes. But the only way that's ever going to come is if you focus on your work. If you're focused on the obstacle the whole time, they're not even going to address you because they're too busy. I mean, think about it. Go with the Francis Ngannou example, right? If you're going to go try to play punch face with him, is he going to work on his wrestling? Nah, he's just going to punch you in the face, and that's it. And that's what's going to happen with Amazon. If you go try to fight him, you're going to lose. You're going to lose that game of punch face 99 times out of 100, if not worse. And that's how you have to look at these things. You got to choose your fights, choose which obstacles you want to attack. And, really, like we've been talking about this whole time, have the patience to change your perspective on these things.
Yeah. Well, and I got one special treat for everybody on the YouTube channel. Here is a tank ditch.
Ooh.
My platoon built many years ago out at Fort Irwin, California. So you can see it is literally a ditch.
So I'll describe it for all those just listening. It's a ditch. It is a big ditch, and that's. Yeah, no, the description really did it justice, amazingly.
Yeah.
Well, and for anyone who's watching the video, they already see this. In honor of our April theme of obstacles, we got a fun little obstacle where my computer decided not to let me have video. And so, obstacles come up all the time. You got to take a lesson from it. So I already had one I was thinking, Dad. I'll throw it to you, though. What lesson are you learning from this obstacle that we just faced during this recording?
Keep going. I mean, that's to me the video, and truthfully in my head, I rolled through some options, start, reboot, all those sort of things. You know what? Nah. Is it that critical? Audio sounds good. Knock, knock. Anybody here? Anybody listening? Don't always need the video, right?
Oh yeah.
And so, was it enough to stop and restart? Not in my book. So I made that decision and overcame that obstacle fairly quickly.
Yes, sir. And yeah, I realized the timing felt weird, but then the less I thought about the timing being weird, the less weird the timing was. It's the visual cues that we normally have weren't there. So we got to use different cues, just like a phone call. It's easy. Just got to adjust, right? Change that perspective. And I also realize how many things I do because I think I'm on camera talking with my hands and whatnot that feel really weird when I'm the one who doesn't have the video on.
That's right. It's funny how those things happen. So adjust, adapt, and overcome, right?
Yes, sir.
I think my Marine brothers may say that in some form or fashion. Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank you all for listening to today's show. Special thanks to our sponsors, Verbi Virtual Events and Tribe and Purpose. Find your purpose, build your tribe. You can check out recent episodes of The Camden Otis Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and check out a full archive at thecamdenotishow.buzzsprout.com. The Camden Otis Show is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next week.